Chapter 3. Slang which weeps and slang which laughs. As the reader perceives, slang in its entirety, slang of 400 years ago, like the slang of today, is permeated with that somber, symbolical spirit which gives to all words a mien which is now mournful, now menacing. One feels in it the wild and ancient sadness of those vagrants of the court of miracles who played at cards with packs of their own, some of which have come down to us. The 8 of clubs, for instance, represented a huge tree bearing 8 enormous trefoil leaves, a sort of fantastic personification of the forest. At the foot of this tree a fire was burning, over which 3 hares were roasting a huntsman on a spit, and behind him, on another fire, hung a steaming pot, whence emerged the head of a dog. Nothing can be more melancholy than these reprisals in painting, by a pack of cards, in the presence of stakes for the roasting of smugglers and of the cauldron for the boiling of counterfeiters. The diverse forms assumed by thought in the realm of slang, even song, even raillery, even menace, all partook of this powerless and dejected character. All the songs, the melodies of some of which have been collected, were humble and lamentable to the point of evoking tears. The pegra is always the poor pegra, and he is always the hare in hiding, the fugitive mouse, the flying bird. He hardly complains, he contents himself with sighing. One of his moans has come down to us. I do not understand how God, the Father of men, can torture his children and his grandchildren and hear them cry, without himself suffering torture. 43 The wretch, whenever he has time to think, makes himself small before the low, and frail in the presence of society. He lies down flat on his face, he entreats, he appeals to the side of compassion. We feel that he is conscious of his guilt. Towards the middle of the last century a change took place, prison songs and thieves' ritornels assumed, so to speak, an insolent and jovial mien. The plaintive malure was replaced by the larifle. We find in the 18th century, in nearly all the songs of the galleys and prisons, a diabolical and enigmatical gaiety. We hear this strident and lilting refrain which we should say had been lighted up by a phosphorescent gleam, and which seems to have been flung into the forest by a will-o'-the-wisp playing the fife. Misérables slababo. Mirlaton ribon ribot. Sur lababi mir lababo. Mirlaton ribon ribo. This was sung in a cellar or in a nook of the forest while cutting a man's throat. A serious symptom. In the 18th century, the ancient melancholy of the dejected classes vanishes. They began to laugh. They rally the Grand Meg and the Grand Dab. Given Louis XV. They call the King of France Le Marquis de Pantin. And behold, they are almost gay. A sort of gleam proceeds from these miserable wretches, as though their consciences were not heavy within them any more. These lamentable tribes of darkness have no longer merely the desperate audacity of actions, they possess the heedless audacity of mind. A sign that they are losing the sense of their criminality, and that they feel, even among thinkers and dreamers, some indefinable support which the latter themselves know not of. A sign that theft and pillage are beginning to filter into doctrines and sophisms, in such a way as to lose somewhat of their ugliness, while communicating much of it to sophisms and doctrines. A sign, in short, of some outbreak which is prodigious and near unless some diversion shall arise. Let us pause a moment. Whom are we accusing here? Is it the 18th century? Is it philosophy? Certainly not. The work of the 18th century is healthy and good and wholesome. The encyclopedists, Diderot at their head. The physiocrates, Turgot at their head. The philosophers, Voltaire at their head. The utopians, Rousseau at their head, these are 4 sacred legions. Humanity's immense advance towards the light is due to them. They are the 4 vanguards of the human race, marching towards the 4 cardinal points of progress. Diderot towards the beautiful, Turgot towards the useful, Voltaire towards the true, Rousseau towards the just. But by the side of and above the philosophers, there were the sophists, a venomous vegetation mingled with a healthy growth, hemlock in the virgin forest. While the executioner was burning the great books of the liberators of the century on the grand staircase of the courthouse, writers now forgotten were publishing, with the king's sanction, no one knows what strangely disorganizing writings, which were eagerly read by the unfortunate. Some of these publications, odd to say, which were patronized by a prince, are to be found in the secret library. These facts, significant but unknown, were imperceptible on the surface. Sometimes, in the very obscurity of a fact lurks its danger. It is obscure because it is underhand. Of all these writers, the one who probably then excavated in the masses the most unhealthy gallery was Restif de la Bretonne. This work, peculiar to the whole of Europe, effected more ravages in Germany than anywhere else. In Germany, during a given period, summed up by Schiller in his famous drama The Robbers, theft and pillage rose up in protest against property and labor, assimilated certain specious and false elementary ideas, which, though just in appearance, were absurd in reality, enveloped themselves in these ideas, disappeared within them, after a fashion, assumed an abstract name, passed into the state of theory, and in that shape circulated among the laborious, suffering, and honest masses, unknown even to the imprudent chemists who had prepared the mixture, unknown even to the masses who accepted it. Whenever a fact of this sort presents itself, the case is grave. Suffering engenders wrath. And while the prosperous classes blind themselves or fall asleep, which is the same thing as shutting one's eyes, the hatred of the unfortunate classes lights its torch at some aggrieved or ill-made spirit which dreams in a corner, and sets itself to the scrutiny of society. The scrutiny of hatred is a terrible thing. Hence, if the ill fortune of the time so wills it, those fearful commotions which were formerly called jacqueries, beside which purely political agitations are the merest child's play, which are no longer the conflict of the oppressed and the oppressor, but the revolt of discomfort against comfort, then everything crumbles. Jacqueries are earthquakes of the people. It is this peril, possibly imminent towards the close of the 18th century, which the French Revolution, that immense act of probity, cut short. The French Revolution, which is nothing else than the idea armed with the sword, rose erect, and, with the same abrupt movement, closed the door of ill and opened the door of good. It put a stop to torture, promulgated the truth, expelled miasma, rendered the century healthy, crowned the populace. It may be said of it that it created man a second time, by giving him a second soul, the right. The 19th century has inherited and profited by its work, and today, the social catastrophe to which we lately alluded is simply impossible. Blind is he who announces it. Foolish is he who fears it. Revolution is the vaccine of Jacquerie. Thanks to the revolution, social conditions have changed. Feudal and monarchical maladies no longer run in our blood. There is no more of the Middle Ages in our constitution. We no longer live in the days when terrible swarms within made eruptions, when one heard beneath his feet the obscure course of a dull rumble, when indescribable elevations from mole-like tunnels appeared on the surface of civilization, where the soil cracked open, where the roofs of caverns yawned, and where one suddenly beheld monstrous heads emerging from the earth. The revolutionary sense is a moral sense. The sentiment of right, once developed, develops the sentiment of duty. The law of all is liberty, which ends where the liberty of others begins, according to Robespierre's admirable definition. Since '89, the whole people has been dilating into a sublime individual. There is not a poor man, who, possessing his right, has not his ray of sun. The die of hunger feels within him the honesty of France. The dignity of the citizen is an internal armor. He who is free is scrupulous. He who votes reigns. Hence incorruptibility. Hence the miscarriage of unhealthy lusts. Hence eyes heroically lowered before temptations. The revolutionary wholesomeness is such, that on a day of deliverance, a 14th of July, a 10th of August, there is no longer any populace. The first cry of the enlightened and increasing throngs is, "Death to thieves! Progress is an honest man." The ideal and the absolute do not filch pocket handkerchiefs. By whom were the wagons containing the wealth of the Tuileries escorted in 1848? By the rag pickers of the Faubourg Saint-Antoine. Rags mounted guard over the treasure. Virtue rendered these tattered emalions resplendent. In those wagons in chests, hardly closed, and some, even, half open, amid 100 dazzling caskets, was that ancient crown of France, studded with diamonds, surmounted by the carbuncle of royalty, by the regent diamond, which was worth 30 millions. Barefooted, they guarded that crown. Hence, no more jacquerie. I regret it for the sake of the skillful. The old fear has produced its last effects in that quarter. And henceforth it can no longer be employed in politics. The principal spring of the red spectre is broken. Everyone knows it now. The scarecrow scares no longer. The birds take liberties with the mannequin, foul creatures alight upon it, the bourgeois laugh at it. Chapter 4. The two duties. To watch and to hope. This being the case, is all social danger dispelled? Certainly not. There is no jacquerie. Society may rest assured on that point. Blood will no longer rush to its head. But let society take heed to the manner in which it breathes. Apoplexy is no longer to be feared, but phthisis is there. Social phthisis is called misery. One can perish from being undermined as well as from being struck by lightning. Let us not weary of repeating. And sympathetic souls must not forget that this is the first of fraternal obligations. And selfish hearts must understand that the first of political necessities consists in thinking first of all of the disinherited and sorrowing throngs. In solacing, erring, enlightening, loving them, in enlarging their horizon to a magnificent extent, in lavishing upon them education in every form, in offering them the example of labor, never the example of idleness, in diminishing the individual burden by enlarging the notion of the universal aim, in setting a limit to poverty without setting a limit to wealth, in creating vast fields of public and popular activity, in having, like Briareus, 100 hands to extend in all directions to the oppressed and the feeble, in employing the collective power for that grand duty of opening workshops for all arms, schools for all aptitudes, and laboratories for all degrees of intelligence, in augmenting salaries, diminishing trouble, balancing what should be and what is, that is to say, in proportioning enjoyment to effort and a glut to need. In a word, in evolving from the social apparatus more light and more comfort for the benefit of those who suffer and those who are ignorant. And, let us say it, all this is but the beginning. The true question is this. Labor cannot be a law without being a right. We will not insist upon this point. This is not the proper place for that. If nature calls itself providence, society should call itself foresight. Intellectual and moral growth is no less indispensable than material improvement. To know is a sacrament, to think is the prime necessity, truth is nourishment as well as grain. A reason which fasts from science and wisdom grows thin. Let us enter equal complaint against stomachs and minds which do not eat. If there is anything more heartbreaking than a body perishing for lack of bread, it is a soul which is dying from hunger for the light. The whole of progress tends in the direction of solution. Some day we shall be amazed. As the human race mounts upward, the deep layers emerge naturally from the zone of distress. The obliteration of misery will be accomplished by a simple elevation of level. We should do wrong were we to doubt this blessed consummation. The past is very strong, it is true, at the present moment. It censures. This rejuvenation of a corpse is surprising. Behold, it is walking and advancing. It seems a victor. This dead body is a conqueror. He arrives with his legions, superstitions, with his sword, despotism, with his banner, ignorance. A while ago, he won 10 battles. He advances, he threatens, he laughs, he is at our doors. Let us not despair, on our side. Let us sell the field on which Hannibal is encamped. What have we to fear, we who believe? No such thing as a backflow of ideas exists any more than there exists a return of a river on its course. But let those who do not desire a future reflect on this matter. When they say no to progress, it is not the future but themselves that they are condemning. They are giving themselves a sad malady. They are inoculating themselves with the past. There is but one way of rejecting tomorrow, and that is to die. Now, no death, that of the body as late as possible, that of the soul never, this is what we desire. Yes, the enigma will utter its word, the Sphinx will speak, the problem will be solved. Yes, the people, sketched out by the 18th century, will be finished by the 19th. He who doubts this is an idiot. The future blossoming, the near blossoming forth of universal well-being, is a divinely fatal phenomenon. Immense combined propulsions direct human affairs and conduct them within a given time to a logical state, that is to say, to a state of equilibrium. That is to say, to equity. A force composed of earth and heaven results from humanity and governs it. This force is a worker of miracles. Marvelous issues are no more difficult to it than extraordinary vicissitudes. Aided by science, which comes from one man, and by the event, which comes from another, it is not greatly alarmed by these contradictions in the attitude of problems, which seem impossibilities to the vulgar herd. It is no less skillful at causing a solution to spring forth from the reconciliation of ideas, than a lesson from the reconciliation of facts. And we may expect anything from that mysterious power of progress, which brought the Orient and the Occident face to face one fine day, in the depths of a sepulchre, and made the imams converse with Bonaparte in the interior of the Great Pyramid. In the meantime, let there be no halt, no hesitation, no pause in the grandiose onward march of minds. Social philosophy consists essentially in science and peace. Its object is, and its result must be, to dissolve wrath by the study of antagonisms. It examines, it scrutinizes, it analyzes. Then it puts together once more, it proceeds by means of reduction, discarding all hatred. More than once, a society has been seen to give way before the wind which is let loose upon mankind. History is full of the shipwrecks of nations and empires. Manners, customs, laws, religions, and some fine day that unknown force, the hurricane, passes by and bears them all away. The civilizations of India, of Chaldea, of Persia, of Syria, of Egypt, have disappeared one after the other. Why? We know not. What are the causes of these disasters? We do not know. Could these societies have been saved? Was it their fault? Did they persist in the fatal vice which destroyed them? What is the amount of suicide in these terrible deaths of a nation and a race? Questions to which there exists no reply. Darkness enwraps condemned civilizations. They sprung a leak, then they sank. We have nothing more to say. And it is with a sort of terror that we look on. At the bottom of that sea which is called the past. Behind those colossal waves, at the shipwreck of those immense vessels, Babylon, Nineveh, Tarsus, Thebes, Rome, beneath the fearful gusts which emerge from all the mouths of the shadows. But shadows are there, and light is here. We are not acquainted with the maladies of these ancient civilizations, we do not know the infirmities of our own. Everywhere upon it we have the right of light, we contemplate its beauties, we lay bare its defects. Where it is ill, we probe. And the sickness once diagnosed, the study of the cause leads to the discovery of the remedy. Our civilization, the work of 20 centuries, is its law and its prodigy. It is worth the trouble of saving. It will be saved. It is already much to have solaced it. Its enlightenment is yet another point. All the labors of modern social philosophies must converge towards this point. The thinker of today has a great duty, to auscultate civilization. We repeat, that this auscultation brings encouragement. It is by this persistence in encouragement that we wish to conclude these pages, an austere interlude in a mournful drama. Beneath the social mortality, we feel human imperishableness. The globe does not perish, because it has these wounds, craters, eruptions, sulfur pits, here and there, nor because of a volcano which ejects its pus. The maladies of the people do not kill man. And yet, anyone who follows the course of social clinics shakes his head at times. The strongest, the tenderest, the most logical have their hours of weakness. Will the future arrive? It seems as though we might almost put this question, when we behold so much terrible darkness. Melancholy face-to-face encounter of selfish and wretched. On the part of the selfish. The prejudices. Shadows of costly education. Appetite increasing through intoxication. A giddiness of prosperity which dulls, a fear of suffering which, in some, goes as far as an aversion for the suffering, an implacable satisfaction, the eye so swollen that it bars the soul. On the side of the wretched covetousness. Envy, hatred of seeing others enjoy, the profound impulses of the human beast towards assuaging its desires, hearts full of mist, sadness, need, fatality, impure and simple ignorance. Shall we continue to raise our eyes to heaven? Is the luminous point which we distinguish there one of those which vanish? The ideal is frightful to behold, thus lost in the depths, small, isolated, imperceptible, brilliant, but surrounded by those great, black menaces, monstrously heaped around it. Yet no more in danger than a star in the maw of the clouds.